Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling something that sounds uh, a little bit like science fiction. The Earth is tilting, and guess what? It's our fault.
Well, maybe not entirely our fault, but human activity is definitely a factor. We're going to be talking about how pumping out groundwater actually has an effect on the Earth's axis.
Yeah, I have to admit, when I first heard about this, I immediately started thinking about all those disaster movies. Is the planet gonna like tip over? Are we all gonna, slide into the ocean?
Not exactly. It's not really about some kind of sudden catastrophic event. It's more like a gradual shift that will have some pretty big long-term effects. Imagine, those spinning tops, right? When you add a little weight to one side, it starts wobbling differently. Well, that's kind of what's happening when we deplete all the groundwater.
So we're basically messing with the Earth's balance.
Exactly. To understand how this works, we have to kind of visualize what's going on under the surface. Imagine a giant underground sponge. That's what we call an aquifer. It's like a layer of rock and soil that holds all the groundwater. And of course, we use that water for, everything. Drinking water, irrigation, you name it.
Ah, I see. So when we pump out a ton of groundwater, it's kind of like squeezing out that giant sponge, which changes how the Earth's weight is distributed.
Precisely. And there was a recent study, it was published in Geophysical Research Letters. They found that the Earth's rotational axis has actually shifted by 31.5 inches. And this happened in less than 2 decades. Now you might be thinking, well, 31.5 inches, that's not really that much. But when you think about it on a planetary scale, it's actually a really big deal.
Whoa, yeah, that is pretty crazy.
hmm
But what does this tilt actually mean for us? What are the consequences?
Well, first of all, it contributes to rising sea levels. Think about it. All that groundwater that we're pumping out, it has to go somewhere, right? It ends up in the oceans. The study actually found that about 0.24 inches of sea level rise is specifically because of this tilt.
Okay, 0.24 inches.
hmm
It doesn't sound like a lot, but I guess every little bit adds up, especially when we're talking about the entire planet.
It all adds up, exactly. And rising sea levels are just one of the consequences. This tilt can also impact things like climate patterns and even the length of our days. Everything's connected.
This is seriously blowing my mind. So how did scientists even figure this out? How do we know it's groundwater that's causing this tilt? I mean, couldn't it be something else?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. There's this geophysicist, Seo. He led this team of researchers. They created these computer models that could simulate all these different scenarios. And they put in all kinds of different factors that could maybe be causing the tilt. But you know what? The only model that actually matched the tilt they were observing was the one that factored in the redistribution of, get this, 2,150 gigatons of groundwater.
2,150 gigatons.
And how many understand that number? Because honestly, I have no idea how much water that is.
So imagine this. If you took all the water in Lake Superior, the largest of the Great Lakes, and multiplied it by like 100, you'd be getting close.
Oh, wow. Okay, that definitely puts things into perspective. So we're talking about a massive amount of water, and we're just pumping it out of the ground like it's an endless supply.
Which, unfortunately, it's not. And what's even more interesting is that the research actually pinpointed a specific region that's kind of a key player in this whole tilting thing.
Really, which region is that? The mid-latitudes. Specifically, we're talking about places like Western North America and Northwestern India. It turns out that where you remove the weight from the Earth actually matters, in terms of how it affects the rotation. And when you take a lot of weight out of the mid-latitudes, it throws the balance off even more.
So it's not just about how much water we're pumping out, it's also about where we're taking it from.
Exactly. It's all about these delicate balances in the Earth's systems. And this whole thing with the tilt, it really highlights how even the smallest actions can have these huge ripple effects on a global scale.
It's kind of like that butterfly effect thing, right? Where one tiny flap of a butterfly's wings can cause a hurricane on the other side of the world.
Exactly. And in this case, it's showing us that something as simple as pumping groundwater, something we do all the time, can have these crazy, far-reaching consequences.
Okay, well, this is all starting to feel a little bit heavy.
hmm
Before we spiral into an existential crisis, are there any solutions to this? Can we fix this, or are we stuck with a wonky planet forever?
Well, the good news is that the first step to a solution is just being aware of the problem. Now that we know about this connection between groundwater and the Earth's tilt, we can start to figure out how to manage our water resources better and make things more sustainable.
So we're not doomed, there's hope. Tell me more about these solutions.
We'll definitely dive into those solutions after a quick break. But just to give you a sneak peek, we'll be talking about things like rainwater harvesting, smarter irrigation techniques, and even looking into other sources of water like desalination. It's all about using less groundwater and being a little more clever about how we manage the water we do have.
It sounds like we have our work cut out for us, but at least we know where to start. We'll be right back after a short break to explore those solutions in more detail. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were talking about how pumping groundwater can actually shift the Earth's axis.
And how there are solutions. We don't have to just, give up. It's all about understanding the problem and then doing something about it. So let's talk about those solutions.
Okay, yeah, let's get into it. You mentioned rainwater harvesting earlier. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Sure. It's a really basic idea, but it actually works really well. Basically, instead of letting rainwater just run off, into the storm drains and stuff, we capture it. So think about things like rain barrels, or you can have like a rooftop collection system. You can even just direct the water into your garden.
So it's like we're giving back to Mother Nature,
Right.
replenishing what we've been taking.
Exactly. It means we don't have to rely on groundwater as much, and it also helps refill those underground aquifers we were talking about. Imagine if you had like millions of homes all collecting rainwater. It would make a huge difference.
That makes sense for people's homes, but what about for agriculture? They use a ton of groundwater. What are some solutions for that?
That's a great question. For agriculture, it's all about using smarter irrigation techniques. The traditional ways, like flood irrigation, they waste so much water. You're just like soaking the fields, and then a lot of it just evaporates before it can even reach the plant's roots.
So we need to be more efficient about how we water crops, more targeted.
Exactly. There are technologies like drip irrigation, which deliver the water directly to the plant's roots. It's much more efficient.
That sounds pretty cool.
Yeah.
What about desalination? That thing you mentioned about turning seawater into fresh water. Is that a realistic option?
Yeah, desalination has a ton of potential. Think about it. The oceans are huge. If we could just figure out how to remove the salt, we'd have an almost unlimited water supply. Of course, there are some challenges. It can take a lot of energy, and then there's the question of what to do with all the leftover salt, which is called brine. But technology is always improving, so desalination is becoming more efficient and more sustainable all the time.
So it's a good idea, but still needs some work.
Basically, it just shows that there's not one single solution that's going to fix everything. It's going to take a lot of different approaches to solve this problem.
Okay, so we've got people collecting rainwater, farmers using better irrigation, and scientists working on desalination. What about governments? What can they do?
Governments have a really important role to play here. They can make policies that encourage people to use water more sustainably. Think about things like tax breaks for people who use water-efficient technology. Or they could put limits on how much groundwater people can pump. Or they could even do these big public awareness campaigns. It's all about giving people and businesses a reason to be responsible.
So it's about creating a system that supports water conservation.
Yeah, exactly. We need to shift our whole way of thinking about water. We can't just act like it's an unlimited resource. We have to conserve it. It's what keeps our planet alive.
It's interesting thinking about this whole Earth tilt thing. It's not just some science thing, It affects all of us personally. It makes you realize that every decision we make about water matters, even something small like turning off the tap while you're brushing your teeth.
That's a really good point. It just shows how connected we are to the planet. Everything we do has consequences, not just for us, but for the whole world.
It's like the Earth is trying to tell us something, like a wake-up call.
I like that. A wake-up call. It's a chance for us to change our perspective, to stop thinking about dominating nature and start thinking about taking care of it.
From taking to giving back. From using it all up to protecting it.
Exactly. We need to understand that we don't own the Earth. We're part of it. It's time to start acting like it.
This has been such a fascinating conversation. So much more than just the Earth is tilting. It's about our responsibility and how connected we are to the planet. And most importantly, our ability to make a difference.
It's been great talking to you. It's so important that we all learn about our planet. That's how we'll be able to protect it.
And to all our listeners out there, we want to leave you with this. The Earth is tilting, not just physically, but in a way, metaphorically, too. It's tilting towards a future that we're creating with all our choices. What kind of future do we want? One that's balanced, sustainable, and harmonious? Or one where things are off balance and we use everything up? The choice is ours. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent this whole episode talking about how using groundwater can actually tilt the Earth's axis.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about it. It really shows you just how connected everything is on this planet and how even little things we do can have big consequences.
You know, the more we talk about this, the more I start to think about this tilt as like a symptom, like a sign that something's not right, like the Earth is trying to tell us something.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. Yeah, it's not just some scientific fact. It's like a reflection of how we treat the planet.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We always hear about climate change in terms of like the temperature going up or crazy weather, but this tilting, it feels different somehow, like it's more serious, like we're messing with the very foundation of the planet.
Yeah, I think you're right. It shows us that we're not just living on this planet, we're a part of it. And everything we do affects it. We affect its balance and whether it's stable.
It makes you wonder, have we just become so disconnected from nature that we've forgotten how much we depend on it?
I think that's definitely part of it. We're so busy with our lives and technology, we don't even think about where our water comes from or how the planet works. This tilt is like a reminder.
Maybe it's like a wake-up call, like a chance for us to rethink how we treat water and the whole planet.
I like that, a wake-up call. It's like, okay, we messed up, but we can change things. We can go from thinking we control nature to taking care of it.
From just taking and taking to actually giving something back. From using everything up to protecting what we have.
Right, we need to realize that we don't own the Earth, we're just a part of it. And it's time we started acting like it.
This has been such an amazing conversation. We started out talking about the Earth tilting, but it's become so much more than that. It's about how we're all connected and what our responsibility is to the planet. It's about realizing that we can change things.
I totally agree. It's been awesome exploring all these ideas with you. And remember, the more we all know about how our planet works, the better we can protect it.
And to everyone listening out there, we'll leave you with this thought. The Earth is tilting. Yeah. Not just physically, but also, in a way, metaphorically. We're the ones who are deciding what the future is going to be like. Do we want a future where things are balanced and sustainable and harmonious? Or do we want one where everything is out of whack and we use it all up? It's up to us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.